should I start with the roll call statement order? Are we ready? Okay. Hi, everyone. This is the Affordable Housing Subcommittee of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. The meeting has now commenced. It is June 15th at 4:04 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to speak or to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so we can track quorum. Also, in order to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. Okay, so roll call. I have myself, Sheree Jimenez, Jim Toffel.
Present.
Olga Flores.
Here.
These are our voting members, so we have quorum. Ex officio, we have Marianne Beerley, Maggie Amaro Tejas, Megan Headings.
Here.
Corin Manning.
Here.
Ismael Marcos Ismael, it's backwards.
Presente.
Betty Viegas. I see
Here.
you. Yay, there you are. Hi, Betty. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is called to the audience. This is the time when any member of the public, and also thank you to all of our guests who are on the line. I see some of you here. This is a time when any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. Due to time constraints, the total time allocated for this is 15 minutes. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting law, commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. Do we have anyone who wants to address the commission? Okay. We have a smaller group today, so hearing no one, let's move on to the next agenda item. This is being led by Sarah Megason, right? So Sarah, I'll let you take the lead here.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I did make a PowerPoint just to try to figure out everything from the survey and kind of make a plan for moving forward. So I'm going to share my screen. And I do have my notes up, etc. But if you want to chime in, please do so, since I'm not really paying attention to the Zoom chat or anything. So holler out if you want to say something. So a couple weeks back, probably a month ago or so, you guys all created a list, and I took that list and created a sort of a survey to determine the priority. And ultimately I was going to then try to drill it down, but I thought maybe just for, something to be more effective, to kind of go with the highest priorities that came out of that survey initially, develop some action items, and then continue to drill down on the other things that weren't maybe so high on the prioritization list. So we'll go ahead and kind of get started. I started off the survey by asking the categories that you'd like to be prioritized, and the funding category, was the top choice of everybody, 67%, and the second choice was zoning. So those were the two top categories. The third choice was pretty close, but kind of wanted to focus in on these two initially, and then we can dive into the other categories as well as we move through in the future. So inside of funding, breaking that down, the first thing that was on the list for prioritization was a general obligation bond. And then the second item was the housing trust fund. So 60% chose for the general obligation bond, and then 40% chose the housing trust fund. Now, we know that bonds are a lot more difficult, obviously, as it has to be a ballot measure. So, you know, I kind of decided to take a stab at the housing trust fund first, sort of knowing that if we get this reinstated and get it going, that as we move forward, we could potentially keep advocating for a general obligation bond or a sales tax or something of the sort. But in order to do that, we should have the housing trust fund set up so that the money can be directly funneled into it. So we do have a Tucson HTF, Tucson Housing Trust Fund, that was created in 2006. It's sort of like not defunct, but not doing anything at this point in time. It is a direct policy out of the HAST plan 9.1 to reinstate the housing trust fund. So kind of the idea that this is something right off the bat that we can do because it's in the plan and we can do a sort of a check mark. Jim, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just, I guess, quick question. So the Housing Trust Fund was created in 2006. When was it stopped? Was it in 2008 when all the budget issues were occurring for the city, 2009?
I think so. I kind of touched base with Ann today while she's in a great cell spot on vacation. And she said she's done a lot of research and we have a bunch of information about it, but I think that's kind of exactly what happened. It was started right before the recession. Then the recession hit, some funding went into it. I think there's approximately $200,000 in the fund. And then I just think that, you know, the committee that was created to do stuff with it no longer exists. The way that the laws, bylaws and rules and regulations were written, it's really hard to access that monies right now. So it's just sort of defunct, and I believe that is the time period, but we can get back to you on that as well.
And do you know, was it just funded from the general fund, or was there some specific source?
Yeah, our HAST plan kind of goes into that. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. And like I said, Anne had kind of created a bit of information, but let me find it. So it's 9.1, 9. Hang on, I think it talks about where the funding came from. So hang on, I found it right here. The Tucson was to oversaw collection and distribution of the funds. The identified sources were used to cover budget deficits. I think it was through, oh, here we go. Sale of city-owned properties, a fee on the conversion of rental properties, and some unexpected funds from this utility service low-income assistance program. And something to do with the Gadsden agreement as well. That was through, you know, a thing from the past too. So that was like $150,000, and then a few other things put some more into it. So it was sort of random things at the time. But currently it is not getting any money as we speak.
So, I mean, if we're going to propose to reinstate the housing trust fund, I mean, part of that has to be to identify sources.
Exactly.
So that it's an ongoing funding source. And so I think that's where that's going to be where the challenge is on this, is identifying those sources.
Yeah, and we have we have a memo that outlines some possible funding options. I don't have that accessible right now, but I could get that too. We could kind of do a deeper dive and do a session just based on that, you know, once we sort of direct council to get staff to look at it, and then we can take the time to really start to understand where that money is going to come from. And we have, like I said, a memo with some kind of ideas. I think Corky had sort of assisted with putting some thoughts together for it. So we have some plans and some ideas, and then, you know, moving forward, knowing that potentially like the obligation bond could be a larger, sort of more long-term sustainable way for money to be consistently put into the fund. And also, so along with this is once we direct council to, once we ask council to direct staff to reinstate it, and that's going to take some work because we have to find all of the documentation that started it. We may have to kind of create a new one and dissolve that one somehow, some way. So there's going to be a little bit of work in the background that has to be done, but ultimately we just need council to give us that direction. So that's kind of what came out of that. Moving on to the next, let me pull up the PowerPoint again so I can switch slides. Was going into the zoning category results. So zoning and permitting options out of the list to be prioritized. The first one that had the most votes was density bonuses. The second one was sort of a tie between expedited plan review and reinstating over-the-counter review. So sort of going through the development review process. And then the third priority was parking, kind of tied along with, setback, and I have a spelling error, flexibility for design review, sort of looking at the code. So all of those three kind of being more of code in general. So out of that, I came up with zoning barriers to affordable housing. Ultimately, we know, and we've heard through lots of discussion with various developers for affordable housing as well as housing in general, that there are barriers to building housing in the development and use specific standards of the development code, and also the major streets and routes plans. So that setbacks, height limitations, the use tables and use specific standards, which often make it difficult to construct quality and effective affordable housing. So kind of going back to the HAST plan and realizing we have direct charge to update zoning regulations to encourage affordable housing and more specifically update development standards and create tools to incentivize affordable housing. We're starting to see some municipalities preparing zoning audits of their development codes to identify the prevalence and nature of regulatory constraints, particularly on housing. And then the White House has in their budget incentives for municipalities to revamp their zoning regulations to help create more affordable housing in communities seeking skyrocketing home prices. So knowing that that's on the horizon, wanting to charge staff to start taking a look at the zoning code. I know personally, I just did a sort of use deep dive into shelter care. So looking also at, it's not only just development of affordable housing, but these housing uses that we're seeing as they're very difficult. There's a lot of use specific standards tied to shelter care, making it more and more difficult to be able to provide these to sort of help to solve our homeless solutions. So, looking at it not just from the development lens, but also, just the housing continuum lens, which is what the HAST plan really intends for us to look at. So kind of looking at a zoning code audit to really address those issues and in a holistic way, so that we're not just ticking off parking or ticking off setbacks or looking at height and kind of doing these one-offs, but really trying to address it in a more comprehensive capacity. Keeping in mind that we do have the parking recommendations still in the wing. So, Corin could, kind of talk to that, but we haven't fully gotten any direction from mayor and council as that item was continued, but that is still kind of in the process of looking at parking regulations for affordable housing. And then kind of on the next step here is facilitating affordable housing development. So kind of along the same lines and tying it back to the HAST again, so that we have, HAST policies that we're really trying to implement, streamlining development review process for affordable housing projects. So how can we create an affordable housing HOV lane for development review? That was kind of a term I heard recently. I liked it. How can we do an expedited review, bring back over the counter review, or something that assists some of these housing developments to go through? We've also sort of been talking and hopefully potentially using our Milagro on Oracle LIHTC project to look at the overlay districts and figure out how the overlay districts and design review for those could be, a conditional approval, so that you can get that approval before you apply for a LIHTC project potentially as well. So, kind of taking a look at how we can facilitate affordable housing development in this more streamlined development review process. So those were all of the sort of main topics that came out, I think, which gives us 3 potential actionable items with the Housing Trust Fund, a UDC audit, and then a fast track permitting process that could potentially be kickstarted. And so out of that, knowing that there's still going to be work that needs to be done. And, this is just the first step, looking at these sort of 3 options to be able to move forward, go to the full commission, and then, potentially get mayor and council to direct us on this right now. Jim.
Actually, let Marcos go first. He said.
Oh, sorry, Marcos, I didn't see your hand. It was blending into the background.
That's okay. I think you found some of the information. I was just going to add with regards to the Housing Trust Fund. It was originally funded by condo conversions.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that did work for a little while until the market crashed. And then the money that was collected at the time, I mean, it was my understanding that all the dollars that were collected from the condo conversions, at least, were expended on down payment assistance. So there was a special down payment assistance set aside for that assisted families that were above the HUD income guidelines. I think it was like between 80% of area median income and 100% of area median income. So kind of like a middle income down payment assistance project, which was very popular, and all the funds were obligated in like within a months after being released. They were.
No, that's really great. And I know Anne has an entire folder that I just sort of looked at right before coming into this meeting today of trying to find all the historical documentation. So we need to piece together a little bit more to fully understand, the whole story, but ultimately we haven't been, formally directed to look at anything. So she kind of threw it all together and then it hasn't been touched since. So, yeah.
So the challenge these days is finding, a permanent funding stream for a housing trust fund, given all the preemptions the state has enacted for us in this area. So, yeah, this cities might have more options than counties. I'm not sure, but the way I've read most of the pertinent preemptions, it's I think applies to everyone but the state. But yeah, all the popular ones on Housing Trust Fund, some of the most popular ones other jurisdictions have used would be setting aside or designating a portion of a recording fee on new sales transactions, real estate transaction fees. Those are preempted according to state statute. But that one would be a really good one to tap into. Other than that, it's really difficult. Sale of surplus land, I think you had mentioned. I think that's something that we're looking at the county as well, for surplus properties that may not have affordable housing as the highest and best use. If the surplus land has a higher, a better use on the commercial side, that would net, some substantial proceeds. The properties could be sold and then the proceeds placed into the housing trust fund. But those would be, I think the low-lying fruit, I think would be the surplus properties. And I don't know if there's any ways with the, on the utility side that the city controls, but the county had at one point looked at sewer fees, and that proved to be problematic, I believe. So
If there's unclaimed property in the city limits, does that go to the city or does that go to the state? You know,
county.
it goes to the county?
Unclaimed property, you mean like property that,
Well, I remember there's a state housing trust fund. And my understanding is that was originally funded with unclaimed property that went to the state.
that's personal property, not real property.
Oh,
Yeah, that goes to the state.
so unclaimed property, so if there's
That's
somebody
what the
passes
state-
away, they don't have any heirs and they don't have a will, that goes to the county?
No, the state. I mean, if it's real property, that's different, but personal property and other unclaimed properties, that's the state has control of that.
The state does.
And that's what's funding what's had been funding a majority of their local housing trust fund dollars that the state uses. Yeah, so
Hey, Sarah, can you go back to the list again for the zoning? By the way, this is great. Thank you for putting this together. I think I think it's really insightful having this information. I was thinking that one of the zoning things that we had discussed, and maybe it didn't make it to the list, was zoning flexibility, meaning, allowing a property that is zoned like commercial or some other form of zoning. If they want to build an affordable housing project on it, they don't have to go through a full rezoning process. I could have sworn that was on there somewhere as well, but that would allow, so for example, there's a piece of property on the corner of Broadway and Rosemont where Wings Over Broadway used to be on the southwest corner. They're currently going through a rezoning, and it's going to probably take another 6 to 12 months to finish that. But if that was designated as an affordable site, allowing them to forego that rezoning, I think would, it might be, I don't know, I have to talk to somebody, but it might make it a more viable project for.
Yeah, and we also are seeing that too with, sort of like the Sleepy Hollow project. Like, in order for them to actually get more units where we think we want more units, they would need to go through a rezoning, right? Because the current zoning is MH1. So I'm gonna let Corin kind of speak to that, because I think she might have like a little bit more insight into the legalities of it all. I know that is something that is causing a barrier. So Corin, do you want to go ahead? Did we lose her?
I don't know.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was giving a wonderful explanation. So usually when we see a rezoning for affordable housing or really any multifamily, it's usually for the density. Because most of those sites tend to be zoned, if it's like on a major corridor, like the Broadway Rosemont is a great example. It allows residential. Pretty much, unless you're in an industrial area, you can do residential. And if you're on a major corridor, you usually have at least the ability to do multifamily, but it's really the density to make the project work that's needed. So Broadway Rosemont, they're rezoning to get the density needed, basically. So I think, one of the things on here is a density bonus. And I just want to say, for legal reasons in zoning, it would be very hard to have some sort of flexibility for use. That really is just zoning. The rezoning process is usually the only way to change use. But if it's density, there are with some ways to provide that flexibility or additional density for affordable housing. So this has just one number, 20% is kind of one option. There's a lot of different ways it could be structured potentially. Would that solve all cases where rezoning is needed? Maybe not, but it might alleviate that need on some sites. And I think that would be part of our analysis if we did pursue this of like, let's look at a couple sites and how much of a density increase were they seeking through their rezoning. And what is typical density for a LIHTC project, an affordable housing project? How can we try to create flexibility to get to that density level? So that's some of what we could do in our analysis if we pursue some of these options.
Shay?
Yeah, I just, I guess yeah, I think this is great to be looking at zoning. I had a few other comments that I was wondering is going back to the housing trust fund. I think that makes a lot of sense to focus on that sooner than later, like you said, just to get a potential, like, you know, just to set everything up, right? So that we can start to move money or, you know, raise money. But would an in lieu fee, because that's something that's also, oh, I see a lot with people who do affordable housing, like usually, and this kind of ties back to zoning, because usually the way I've seen it, to get around our state legislature restrictions, instead of kind of mandating any of this, there's like a, you know, a menu of incentives, development incentives that are optional, right? And sometimes in that menu of incentives, there's even, and again, density bonuses might be one of them for affordable housing, where it's like pretty clear, you know, you have some incentives, but then you have some clear restrictions or expectations of what you're going to be providing as far as affordable housing. But sometimes also in that menu, there's an in lieu fee, like where, say, for example, a developer just, maybe a site is zoned for affordable housing, but they just really don't want to do it and they want to do market rate or whatever the case may be, or they can pay an in lieu fee. And that is something, that's something I see that could go back into the housing trust fund. And that, I don't know, depending, I feel like this would be especially pertinent downtown where a lot of people might not, you know, they just might have problems making those projects pencil. And so maybe, again, instead of just killing the whole project or stopping things from going forward, that they could just pay into this, you know, pay into the housing trust fund to, you know, again, just help support affordable housing, even if it wasn't, I don't know. That's just how I've seen it set up in other communities, but I'm curious, anyone's thoughts, or Marcos, if you see any issues with that.
Yeah, I think in anything in that area would work as long as it's voluntary. I think that was how Flagstaff had set up their program. Because of the state statutes prevent us from having a required fee. That's kind of, I think, in part what may have killed the county's program, the rooftop fee we had set up to fund ours at one time, combined with some legal challenges that came about after we started. So as long as it's set up as a voluntary contribution that developers can buy into, then that would work, I think.
But where would be the incentive for them to do it voluntarily? I mean, I guess that's where.
So, you know,
Well,
there's oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I was just gonna say, so the whole kind of thing is like you would get a density bonus, right? Like you have a list of things to choose from, like a, you know, a la carte menu, and you get a density bonus if you're building affordable housing. You could still get a density bonus if you pay an in lieu fee, right? So like you're voluntarily saying that you want one of the things from the a la carte, but then if you're not providing the affordable housing, then there's that financial, you know, then you can pay to get it potentially, and then that would be, that in lieu fee could then be put into the trust fund and to support housing development. So, you know, like California has, and it's totally different, but they have an inclusionary zoning policy, and they can, you know, build market, they can build moderate income, you know, as a part, they're supposed to build moderate income inclusionary in their developments. And if they choose not to and only build market rate, then they have to pay the in lieu fee. And that in lieu fee programmatically was directed to go for very low income. So like, you know, the goal is to try to get mixed income with moderate income inside of these. But if they don't want to do that and they pay, then it goes into, you know, low income projects. So, you know, I think that that's potentially how to do it. And, you know, I know that there's appetite. I know Anne has been really excited about, we have more meetings with Flagstaff, you know, coming up to kind of see how they got their list of things, you know, their a la carte menu. One thing too to think about is we have the Sunshine Mile overlay district where we had some density bonuses included into that. We have analysis of that kind of being worked on right now. Is it going to work as it's written? And then there's potential to also move towards, oh, Corin, you're not.
Lots going on with the west side, so.
Corin, you're not muted, FYI. I don't think she can hear us. So there's also the infill incentive district is sort of being updated as we speak. And affordable housing is a big part of that. And so as we sort of work to do more, like, you know, with that work that happens, that could help inform how to have maybe a more blanket affordable housing, you know, incentive. So kind of taking a stepping stone, doing it at the IID level first, and then maybe seeing how we could do it at a citywide level. I see Mary Ann has her hand up, so.
Oh, yeah, sorry, just really quick. I think that was my other piece of my question, was just how to structure this, because the Uniform Development Code audit seems like that's something that would be in PDSD's department. And so again, like how exactly is our role as the commission in influencing this? And or is the structure like this, like we're talking about, you know, it's this incentive overlay basically?
But I think there's a couple of two different kind of topics, right? The Unified Development Code audit really just looks at the whole development code and where barriers to housing exist in our existing code. And I think that has to be done like, you know, as a holistic level. And because Biden's administration is going to try to incentivize that, I think, you know, if housing is assisting with that and we find additional funding, it could be like a co-collaboration between two departments, right? To sort of assist in that process. And then the sort of, that's like a larger, you know, sort of beast, obviously. And then there's looking at what we're doing right now, which is we have, you know, a couple of things already in place and we're actively in process on updating the infill incentive district. So sort of taking it one step at a time with what we have currently and then looking at it from a larger perspective as well. Mary Ann and then Jason.
Yeah, thank you. So my video is down, but with regards to non-affordable housing development, I think, this is just my opinion, if you're asking for a voluntary donation, I still think that there should be a minimum. Because, you know, if I'm asking for these waivers and, you know, density changes, you know, are you going to take 500 from me to give me that? I mean, so is there some kind of limit or scale, if you will, of how much of assistance you can get from the city based on what your contribution is?
Yeah, and that would be established 100%.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Jason?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, I don't think we've had a meeting since the tax credit awards have been sent out. I don't believe that we've met. I think I hear the input about Housing Trust Fund and other sources, but I think there's a larger issue I don't know if people are aware of how many units Tucson was awarded this last round, 63 units, one project, and no Pima County projects scored high enough to win in the general pool. The city of Tucson was awarded the special project by the state, the discretionary project. We talked in this committee previously about the structure of the QAP and people's concerns about the CRA district overlaying 85705, 85701. That was the difference in the applications that were submitted. Only two were submitted, one by the city and one by La Frontera, Arizona, which was the Sleepy Hollow project, which was not awarded. And so I think one of the things that we need to talk about as an affordable housing committee is actually getting sources, actually sourcing these opportunities. Largely, affordable housing is created by the low-income housing tax credit program, and Tucson got 5.5% of the allocated units this last round, and they're 14.5% of the population of the state of Arizona. So I think we need to do a better job of lobbying the state of Arizona and getting a QAP that allows Pima County to be competitive, because technically last year or this year, Pima County did not win a project. Pima County could not win a project. It can be restated. Could not win a project because of the CRA district overlaying into 85701 and 85705, which were excluded from scoring points. So I think we need to do a better job lobbying the state of Arizona and the Arizona Department of Housing to get our fair share of units. We should have had over 155 units awarded to us this year, and we were awarded 63 by a gift.
Hey, Jason, just as we did have Ruby come speak to the full commission, not the affordable housing group, but the full commission meeting. And we brought that up that, Tucson's focus is the Thrive in 05, the 85705 zip code. And that's on the list of zip codes that do not receive an extra 10 points from the state. So Ruby did tell us and did share that they could make minor tweaks to the QAP for 2023. And, so I think that's one of the things that we're going to do as a commission this next year is give them some of that feedback. And I believe that the state is open to making that change as well on the next round. But I agree with you completely. And that's the driving reason for me being in this commission as well, is I don't feel like Tucson gets its fair share of funding affordable housing.
No, we have the documentation over the last decade. Pima County is grossly undersubscribed in terms of tax credit awards, tax credit dollars, and units. So we've been getting the short end of the stick for a long time. And I mean, we need some serious advocacy. The other thing that I think is somewhat of a concern from a private development standpoint is that we this year, La Frontera, who is the developer for Sleepy Hollow, we spent an extended period of time trying to secure the property from the ownership. We were competing with the city for tax credits this year. And I don't know if that's going to be an ongoing. Is the city of Tucson going to be submitting applications in the future? Is that going to be an ongoing thing that happens? Because from what I can understand, I think this is the first year that it actually happened. That the city of Tucson put a tax credit application in.
I believe that the city does have a goal to start doing more of that. It was a last minute decision, I think, to submit this year, is my understanding. But Anne's not with us, is she?
No,
Today?
it's just me.
Yeah, Anne and Liz, it would be better.
Yeah.
Better to answer that question.
Maybe we can put that on the next month's agenda, because I know in the circles that I work, that's a concern.
Yep. So thank you, Jason. And Joe, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I saw Marcos' hand go up too. Did you have a follow-up on that, Marcos? Because you can go first.
Yeah, just on the history, the city of Tucson has applied for and received low-income housing tax credits in the past. Most recently was MLK Apartments downtown. I say recent, it was probably 10 years ago, but and then the Tucson house was last renovated with LIHTC under the leadership of Karen Thorenson when she was director of the city housing department. So those are two that I know of. I think there was one other one that was done in conjunction with a Hope 6. Well, those were all Hope 6 projects. So the city's LIHTC history dates back to the Hope 6 grants in conjunction with public housing redevelopment. I believe there have been 3 over the history of the tax credit project. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Marcos.
Yeah, good to know. I will dissent. I look forward to more involvement with the city, hopefully trying to get us more of those units so we can get to our fair sharing. I think that's a good thing. I'd also add to Shay's really good points about talking about like linkage type fees. One of the things that has been discussed in community benefit agreement discussions was contributions possibly to a trust fund that would effectively serve in that fashion. 2 other points. One is, we're a subcommittee of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development, and I want to make sure that if zoning changes are being considered, that equity is at the forefront. Because I didn't see that really mentioned anywhere in what we were talking about. So I think that's important. And I know in the Housing Segregation Subcommittee, we've talked about things like exclusionary zoning and had conversations about equitable zoning reform. Sarah, I know I've sent you some links about that and resources for it. With regards to funding, one thing I've always been curious about for a few years now that I haven't heard anybody talk about is there any reason why property taxes need to be flat taxes, or could those theoretically be progressive?
Are you talking about state property tax?
Any of it?
So my understanding is a bill just passed at the state level this last week. There is a property tax exemption for affordable housing projects, but it was capped at 200 apartments, and they removed that cap. So now projects that are over 200 units also have that exemption. I don't know any more about it than that, though.
That's good. That's good to hear. I was just wondering if there was, any reason why property tax couldn't be structured more like income tax, where you have like progressive marginal rates, and if you have a property that's worth more money, you pay a higher percentage of tax. Since we're talking about funding. Nobody knows?
No, but I will chime in real quick and say that we just got selected to be a part of a Make It Home cohort, which is like a sort of a learning experience to look at vacant and abandoned properties and taking bad properties that are delinquent in property taxes, et cetera, and to see how that can be repositioned and things like that. The problem is that the state of Arizona has a lot of rules around all of this. So I think, Joe, yes, something like that could be done. It's just at the state level and not at the local level. And so continually advocating for, some changes at the state level, I think will be an ongoing process that we have to do. And as we learn more through that Make It Home cohort, once we know of specific things that would need to be changed, we could bring it back to you all and try to run it up the ladder and then advocate for those changes to be made. So I think that there are things that can be done. We just have to kind of work through it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Shay?
I mean, my understanding that was that more or less, I mean, that's why we have the assessor to place valuation on property, more or less to an extent. Properties are weighted and taxed somewhat on value, but I agree. I mean, in general, like, yeah, taxes is it's a hairy beast. I actually watched, last year, one of the most compelling like conversations on equity I listened in on was all about reforming taxes because and so yeah, yeah, I'm with you, Joe, but I also agree. I think those are just so large and outside of, much harder to tackle, than what we can do in just this commission. But yeah, I mean, I think they're all worth looking at. I mean, the county, I mean, maybe we could get the county assessor in here and have them talk about, how they weight and value all that. I mean, I think that's a great place to start because it's local. But yeah, and then I still want to kind of go back to some of these buckets we talked about. As people are mentioning LIHTC, and I completely agree. I wish we could get more of these projects. I'm wondering if that's worth adding as its own separate goal. I mean, now that I kind of look back on the survey results, I'm not sure we had it as its own kind of standalone topic, but again, so many people here I know are interested and want to make that happen. I don't know. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I think that should be a focus because that is the primary funding mechanism for a lion's share of affordable housing projects.
So just so you can see what I ended up doing is I sort of created 3 recommendations that you guys can make to the full commission. I just drafted these up so that I didn't have to make one up like I did the last time on the fly. I feel like I did that horribly last time. So tried to be a little more prepared to give you guys some options. These are completely draft. You guys can scrap them. You could change them if you want. These were sort of 3 things that we thought you could take to the full commission at the next meeting to then forward on to mayor and council so that we could have at least some action items moving forward. But willing to take any, input. If you really want to, change some things around, we can totally do that. So just wanted to, get your guys' thoughts on it and see if you're willing to make any recommendations towards the major commission.
So the question, so the top voted item was to try to put a measure on the ballot for a bond. Is that something that's not worth, I mean, I know nothing about how to do that or how to start that process or how complicated it is. But is that something that should be on this list?
Yeah. And that was kind of what I thought. I think that we can add that in here and we can totally recommend to mayor and council to look at doing that. I think the reason why I left it off is knowing that it is really large, and maybe what we should do is get the housing trust fund squared away first and kind of continue to do a little bit more research. And maybe you guys could advocate, talk to mayor and council, get the appetite of the political nature, and think of what you would want that to look like. Then we could refine that once the housing trust fund is sort of reinstated. Then we can really focus on that. Now you can also say that whether or not you want to wait or you want to do it now, it's completely up to you guys.
I think this would be a great time to have both Marcos and Betty weigh in because they were the last people I know who actively worked to get the last housing bond passed. Can you guys speak to that and how you even just went about starting that process?
Well, sure, I can speak to that. I mean, but from the county's perspective, I know our county administrator and our CIP team look closely at the county's debt. and maintaining our rating. So, and that's big. And so a lot of times we want to make changes, do more bond, obligate more funds, but because it would affect our credit rating for investors that would eventually be purchasing these bonds. It's a delicate balance. So, I haven't, because we don't have any ongoing bond projects, I haven't been involved in the meetings, and I don't know where we're at, but we would definitely have to follow up with our finance team, that works with the bonds, our CIP team. And I imagine the city would have to look at the same concerns. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is the political appetite and, what the voter sentiment is very hard to predict. So in 2015, we thought we had a good opportunity, but we were really slammed at the ballots. And I think, I don't think any of ours made it. I think the cities might have had one, their park bond most recently approved. But yeah, that's, I think in my mind that voter sentiment it would be the most challenging aspect. And I think I had mentioned before the way to change that is, marketing. And I don't think we did the best job we could have in marketing the 2015 bond package when it came out. So I think we can learn from that lesson. If we decide to go about this in the future, there would definitely, in my mind, have to be some funding identified for marketing, like at least $10,000 or more. So I don't know if Betty has anything to add.
I can go back further to 1997.
Sure. That's tag team.
Which was the first bond for affordable housing. And that was successful because there was political will, first of all. And the county was very successful in past bond projects. In fact, 2015 was probably the first time that it was voted down. Any bonds were voted down in the county. So it was just it was a hard time. It was really difficult during that time. But obviously it has to be, the timing has to be right. Is there appetite for the bond for general bonds right now? And I honestly, with the inflation the way it is, I don't think so. I don't think that it would be successful at all, just because of the way that the economy is and where it's heading right now. I think that it's a good time to plan for future. I think that we could really look at how the 97 bond was put together. The important part of that and the 2004 bond, which was the next bond after that was successful, is the question, right? Because the question to the voters drives what we can do with those funds. And I think I've said it before, it has to have a public benefit in order for us to be able to use it for affordable housing. You have to make the case, and you have to make sure that you have that the question to the voters that they vote on is and that can be touchy. The first one, we pretty much didn't know what we were doing, and all we could do was infrastructure in the public right of way. So we had to get real creative in how we would be able to use those funds. That was the first $5 million. The second time, the question was worded differently, so we could do more with it, more than just the infrastructure. But all in all, they were both, I mean, if you look at how many units came out of there and the leverage that came out of it, I mean, it is a good program. And I think, as I said, we wouldn't be able to go out for a bond now. There has to be a lot of planning. And also you have to look at capacity. How much bonding capacity does the city have? In the past, they haven't had that much capacity. That's why they never went for an affordable housing bond. That may have changed by now. So you have to look at the capacity. That's why the county has a lot of capacity to go for these types of bonds. So that's another issue that you have to look at as well. But I think it would be good for us to really understand that, to bring somebody from CIP, if there's anybody around that from those days, to come and talk to us about what it takes to put a bond together.
Who on this group is part of the county's affordable housing group, or the focus group? I don't know what it's called.
I was just about to ask the same question, Jim, because I was curious if this is on Marcos, on your guys' agenda too.
Yeah, I represent South Tucson on that committee.
And I've been involved as a staff member observing. Bonds have not really come. I mean, they've been discussed, but I didn't see them on as like it wasn't put out as like one of the immediate recommendations. Is that what you picked up, Betty?
Yeah, the board of supervisors did pass a pay-go program, which included 5 million for affordable housing.
Right. Yeah. I was going to add that. And I'm not sure if that.
And that didn't even come. That didn't come from the committee, though. That actually came from District 5.
Yeah, that's why I was going to bring that up. That really wasn't one of the recommendations,
Yeah.
but it was something that has been mentioned by some of the task force members that, as far as some of the challenges that they have and what would be, what would help them going forward. Of course, funding is always on that list, but
The good thing is that the board did pass it. Now, how it's going to be implemented, that's where they're at now. They want zone, I don't know, somebody to come back and give them an implementation plan on those 5 million.
right.
As well as they've also asked for a whole list of county-owned properties.
Right.
So with the understanding, so Maggie just put something in the chat that it is a short-term group, so maybe that's not the right place for it. Or maybe there could be a seed planted that, something
Yeah.
could happen a year or two down the road or whatever.
So what's going to happen is there's going to be a wrap-up meeting in the near future, Jim, and there is discussion of a regional committee, that will include, all of the cities or towns that they can get on this committee in Pima County. And my understanding too is that it will include the city of Tucson. I didn't get from Dan whether the city of Tucson was partnering with Pima County to set up this regional committee or this regional commission, or if they were going to be asked to be on it. But we are wrapping this up in the very near future with our last meeting.
My understanding is that staff is working on a final draft that then will be reviewed by the task force. Is that correct, Marcos?
Yes, I believe so. There were a number of suggestions that came up, at the last meeting that, we're looking at. And of course, one of the things that will be included is recommendations for the county's housing commission. So I think going forward, the county's housing commission will be, taking up the recommendations that are coming out of the task force. So, and I'm hoping that that one of the things the housing commission will also be tasked with is, administration of this $5,000 allocation. I would think.
5 million.
5 million, sorry. I think that would make sense. And, the one of the original, objectives of the County Housing Trust Fund was to manage housing trust fund dollars. And, in my mind, I'm thinking that, I would like to see the recommendation that the 5 million be formally deposited into the county's housing trust fund, and which would make most sense to me. So I'll be pushing for that. Where we land, we'll have to wait and see. Either way, we'll have that $5 million. It's just I would like to see it under the control of the, with Housing Commission, our county housing commission in charge of making recommendations, and then the county's housing commission would be involved in, I think of helping to coordinate a regional effort, as was mentioned. There's a lot of, there was also a suggestion about having PAG involved in this regional efforts. I don't know if how that will play out, or if that's something that's feasible. So,
Okay. Well, thank you. This was, I think, a very healthy conversation. So going back to Megan's Sarah Meganson's original question is the 3 recommendations. So I've got 2, I guess, more specific thoughts on this list of 3 items. Item number 2, this is the density bonus, the zoning density bonus, correct?
I had the item number 2 to be, or you were saying item number 2 on the zoning list of what we had prioritized was the density bonus. Yes.
Yeah, is that the same thing as item number 2 on this list? Because I'm not sure what it means to initiate a uniform development code audit.
Yeah, so I kind of did this initially, knowing that there was work kind of going on with the IID. We could direct council to, look at density bonuses for affordable housing. We could include that as a part of this sort of. I did this recommendation number 2 to just be the zoning code audit, to start looking at where in the code are the barriers to housing across the continuum. But we could also sort of make another recommendation, then kind of more specifically, until we know where all the barriers are, to, initiate an affordable housing density bonus. And it could be citywide, knowing that, we're probably going to be doing that for the downtown, the IID. A part of me sort of thinks, and this is just my personal opinion, is since we're doing the IID, and I think Corin is on the meeting and she might be able to speak to this a little bit more, but kind of see if we can take what we learned from the density bonus that was written in the Sunshine Mile, see if we can get that into the IID, and then use that as a springboard to then go to a citywide density bonus. But if you guys really want to direct council, or, the whole commission to then direct council to look at it, that's totally up to you. I was sort of thinking of getting to that point, but sort of seeing how the IID update goes as well.
Well, would it make sense maybe just at the end of item number 2, we could say direct council and staff to initiate a uniform development code audit to identify and improve all barriers to the development of the housing continuum, including a 20% density bonus for affordable? I mean, does that make sense, or is it better just to have it as a separate?
I
item.
think we should make it more broad than that. Personally, I think it should be a citywide influence, a citywide affordable housing infill incentive district, because I think that's, to me, and that's where I don't understand why 2 is a goal. Again, I'm just getting confused with the structure and nature of whose domain is what. To me, this UDC audit is really in the domain of PDSD. And I don't know how much we're gonna get into the nitty gritty on that. To me, our work would really be focusing on that citywide affordable housing development incentive and developing that menu of, which of them setbacks, to me, having worked on some of these projects and trying to deal with an MSNR setback, your zoning setbacks, you can never, basically, if the city were to audit our zoning right now, you can never achieve the level of density that the underlying zoning allows you. By the time you add 5 or 6 more constraints, your little pie of buildable area is tiny. And the biggest barrier being the setbacks. Like, it's ridiculously restrictive. And so.
Well, and I agree. I think what you just said works, and we can use Flagstaff as the example, right? Like creating that a la carte menu of affordable housing incentives. And if we get that going, that's great. Then the audit is happening, like you said, partially, potentially, the UDC has to be looked at, across the board. But we do know that the zoning code has barriers to housing specifically. And so I think that'll eventually be kind of a joint programming, especially if we can get funding from the federal government, if the Biden administration budget is approved. And then we could get direct funding to look at where in our code exactly are housing barriers. Because even if we create these incentives, there's still going to be other housing barriers inside of the code that we just don't see blatantly. So I think that I think potentially adding this one as number 2, saying we want to, as quick as we can, create a menu of affordable housing incentives, which would include density bonuses and maybe a la carte menu with in lieu fees, right? That the city could implement right as soon as possible. And that could assist with like what Jason had talked about, and what Corin had mentioned with rezoning. So if you can get a density bonus that doesn't make it so that you have to get a rezoning, then that sort of breaks that barrier as well. So I think I could add this in, and we could have 4 recommendations, and I could kind of reorder them too, so that it's like, housing trust fund, in development incentive program, a zoning audit, and then potentially the fast track for affordable housing projects.
So I think that's great. And I want to make sure we're not doing anything that's in conflict with the HAST plan, because obviously a ton of work was put into that. But there's, I think there's a 5th item that we were discussing today that is really free for the city, that, maybe we should put on here, or maybe it's not, it's not for this list, but is, I think the city really needs to, mayor and council need to lobby at the governor's level to ensure that we are getting our fair share of tax credit projects. The one project that was awarded to Tucson was a gift, because it didn't score high enough. And the way that the program is really set up right now is there was only one project that was awarded outside the city of Phoenix limits in the general fund. So there was a lot of rural projects. There were some rehab projects that were rural. So rural has been getting neglected for the last probably 5 or 6 years. So, there's a lot more rural projects, but outside of those rural projects in urban areas, there was a project in Surprise. And then the one that was the special project awarded in Tucson, every other project was in the city of Phoenix limits. And I agree completely with what Jason said is if we have 15% of the population, we should be getting 15% of the credits. And, that discussion should be happening between, City of Tucson leadership and the mayor's office.
I'm gonna add it to the list because I agree, Jim. I'm sort of thinking that, ultimately, this is, I don't know the best way to do it. I don't know if it should be a recommendation that we take to mayor and council, or if we all just continue to call mayor and council, kind of one-on-one, or what the best way forward is. I'll add it on here because what's gonna happen next is this will go to the main commission meeting, right? So that's the next step. When you take this to the main commission and you give your updates, we'll make sure that it's put on the agenda as its own item for us to recommend these to the full commission. I think we could have the 4 sort of do items, but then we can talk about this issue and Liz will be at that meeting and we can kind of come up with a game plan on how best to do the advocacy. Because ultimately, I don't know what else could be, if there's nothing regulatory that we can do at this point, but like it's that advocacy and how we do that. So I think maybe we just say, I might leave it off of this, but I think we should bring it up at the next full commission meeting.
Yeah, well, I think I'd like to have it on as an agenda item for our next meeting, and I definitely want to see the data that Jason says that he has, and if we can show that data and be the squeaky wheel, to get the oil, I think that's important because, the QAP was set up as a 2-year QAP, and they can make minor modifications, but they're not planning on wholesale changes. So given how we performed in 2022, the stage is set to repeat it in 2023 unless we start making some noise.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I agree with Jim, and I actually think it should be on this. And it might even be a number 4. I think that we should be requesting that the mayor and council meet directly with the Arizona Department of Housing. The mayor in Phoenix has been very active with talking to them and meeting with them on a regular basis. And anytime, I think maybe this committee could even go up there and talk to them as well, just to push it. But I like that. I like what Jim's saying about squeaky wheel, but a very methodical, organized squeaky wheel. The other thing is these setbacks that the city requires, they're from, olden times. It's not the way modern housing is being developed. And, in some cases, I believe it could add more housing, if not more parking on the property. So setbacks are real, they're something that I'm on right now. So thank you.
One last thing, just I guess is a little bit of positive news, so it's not all negative. One of the things I've been doing this last week is working with a couple of the local real estate, multifamily real estate agents to figure out what's in our pipeline and what's getting built in Tucson right now for multifamily. And I was a little bit surprised at some of the results. So in the development pipeline for the city of Tucson, there are currently 73 projects at different stages, either under construction, going through final approval process, preliminary approval, or in the proposal stage. Over 15,000 apartments. Of those that are under construction right now, there's 12 projects in the city and surrounding areas that are under construction right now. Of those, 5 of them are affordable. So La Frontera has 2 projects that are currently under construction. One's on East Grant Road, one's on North Oracle. Greg Moore has 2 projects that are under construction. Both of them are on South Park, the 5,000 block, South Park block. And then Newport Partners has one that's just starting right now down on South Nogales Highway. So, you know, I think the good news and what is we actually are getting, you know, if you look at everything that's under construction right now, you know, 5 of the 12 projects are affordable. So that's good. The concern looking forward, though, is of the 61 projects that are in the preliminary stage, only 2 are affordable. So the stuff that's under construction right now, there is quite a bit happening, but just the stuff that's looking forward, we're not seeing a lot of affordable projects in the pipeline. So
Jim, will you share that with me?
who's that?
Sarah, will you share that with me?
Sure, I can send this to you.
Cool. Joe has his hand raised, but I just want to quickly say that you had said something about not being in conflict with the HASC plan. All of the recommendations that we have are directly tied to the plan. And so I can make sure that in these recommendations, I can include which policy it's directly related to so that we know that we're like kind of in concert with the plan moving forward. But they're all, you know, I'm looking at the one that we just added, but it's 5.3, policy 5.3, update development standards and create tools to incentivize affordable housing. So creating a affordable development incentive program, I think ties directly into that. And Joe?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of specificity that I wanted to address real quick. When we talk about something like a citywide overlay district, I think that's just, I try to parse my language. I think that's a terrible idea. You know, when you talk about going through zoning and making improvements, you're talking about a scalpel. Big overlays like that are a shotgun, not a scalpel. And I think you need to look at the harms that can be caused in that. Again, I've provided documentation on some things like that. The IID is not the role model for this. We know that the Piper report showed us, hey, we're looking at the central business district, which just about correlated with the IID at that point, and we saw gentrification and displacement all around. I think something like 74% of the blocks, right, including some distressed areas where you know, population of Hispanic residents dropped precipitously in that area. So I hope that, again, if we're looking at, I'm all for incentives. If we're looking at zoning options and making modifications there, I want to be sure that we're specifying an equity lens for that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, for me, I think this equity question is a good point to bring up to the commission. I don't know, it feels like in some ways it's being avoided, but you know, for me, the way I see things in a very simplistic way, because once you get into the weeds with gentrification and equity, like it gets really hairy really quickly. And there's lots of I've read the arguments on both sides as to why you should put affordable housing in low income areas, and then arguments as to why you shouldn't. But ultimately, the way I see things is that we have an equity problem in Tucson. It's pretty clear we're divided both on racial and economic lines. And the way I've seen it is like, well, why can't, like, what would equity look like, right? Like, wouldn't it just be a matter of, to me, the model that makes the most sense and what is being proposed at the federal level, and hence, right, tied to funding eventually, is the mixed income models. Is that really, like, what we really want to see is housing options, and housing options for a variety of income levels. So to me, in my mind, that means that in some ways you'd want the higher income areas to have more low income housing and the lower income areas to have higher income housing, right? I mean, isn't that how eventually you get that kind of spread and that mix? I mean, I don't know, but I think, and that's for me why I don't see it being a problem being a citywide, like, just blanket policy, because I feel like at the end of the day, we need affordable housing everywhere. And some of the places we need it the most are the higher income areas. And so and infill is really hard to do in Tucson. Infill is so hard to do in Tucson that developers go to the county. That's why, like, when you look at the numbers of units that are being developed, most of them are in the county, not the city, because it's really hard to develop in the city. So I just feel like in some ways, I want this infill incentive or whatever it is to function not just as affordable housing, but also how do we do better infill, easier, faster, quicker in the city, so we stop sprawling, like, which is another big environmental, right, disaster is sprawl. So, you know, I feel like this tool could be used in a variety of ways, and I personally think it needs to be citywide.
Real quick, one of the things we may want to look at, I know Laura Sharp has been working on an affordable housing prioritization tool that looks at geographically areas of opportunity and what isn't, and where there are good places to put affordable housing. And it looks like the preliminary versions, a lot of them are about putting more affordable housing in areas that are probably are more expensive to make those more mixed income communities. Maybe that's something we want to bring to this committee, or maybe that can come to the CHD in general at some point for a look, so that we get more of that. I'm suspicious about the other part of that, putting market rate kind of development in lower income communities where you may have effects at the lower end of the market to make things less affordable for low income residents. That's all.
Yeah, I think these are all really tough social questions, but in general, deconcentrating poverty is the generally accepted strategy. You know, I grew up in the South Side. Okay, like we look at the school districts alone, and that goes back to that property tax issue. You know, I mean, yeah, it is weighted. So, and it's weighted in a way that those property taxes don't get distributed evenly. So the poor income areas, their property taxes are lower, so their schools are shittier. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that on a public meeting. But you know, it's like ridiculous when you go to Catalina Foothills and look at what their school systems provide, and they come down here and look at, you know, our dilapidated, crumbling schools here. I sent my son to Van Buskirk this year, and it's just sad. It's sad, the state of schools. And so, you know, for me, I'm like, and a lot of the more upper, not even affluent, I'd say middle income, working class families moved out. They've moved out to the county. We need those families back. Like, we need those families back to be advocating for our school systems, to be advocating for our infrastructure. So I feel very strongly that it is about finding that balance, you know, and providing that middle income housing in the South Side is, you know, it's one of the things that needs to happen in pretty much every severely impoverished neighborhood in Tucson.
Yeah.
Okay, on that, I know we're getting off topic, but.
Well, I just want to chime in real quick. We do only have 3 minutes left. I think I messed up the agenda. The meeting's only supposed to go till 5:30. So just for sake of time, just want to bring that up to everybody. But go ahead, Joe. Just wanted to clarify that.
No, I assure Shay that those are issues I've had numerous conversations with over the years. My mom was the reading program facilitator for the Amphi Title I schools, the specifically Title I schools. So I know about how the funding for that works and the kind of resources that are sorely in need in those.
Yeah.
Went to Nash.
I'm gonna inject here. If this meeting ends in 3 minutes, do we need to make a motion to present this to the commission? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to present these recommendations to the full commission.
So anybody want a second?
I'll
Shay or-
second.
Cool. Okay, so we have a second, a motion and a second, and I'll just ask for a roll call. All in favor, say aye.
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 And I saw Shay's mouth move, but she was still muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted.
That's all right. All those opposed say nay. The motion passes. So we'll make sure that we bring this to the full commission at the next full commission meeting. Oh, and Neto extended the time a little bit for us. Good. Thank you, Neto. So we're like, so cool. And is everybody okay with the language as presented here on the slide? Very cool. Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Thank you guys so much. I feel really good. I know that the bond is still gonna happen. I want it to happen, so we'll just figure out how we get the funding sources that we need. In my research today, I just noticed that Denver created a ballot measure that's taxing properties over $2 million for affordable housing. So that was a 2022 bill that just went out for voter approval. So I know that there's movement happening across the country for these types of measures to come out. So we just got to keep advocating. I'll take the next item real quick. The parking item is sort of delayed. And you know, one of the things that we know will come is that mayor and council will probably direct staff to look at reducing parking requirements by right for affordable housing. So I'm working on creating kind of a survey and compiling information on getting proof to show how many parking spaces are actually needed for affordable housing projects. So I will probably distribute a survey to people, you know, that then you can distribute to other developer types that you know to really kind of understand this. I got a really great resource from the NeighborWorks training that Ann and I had attended, where someone literally went and counted parking spots at night at every affordable housing project in their city. And the results were kind of insane to see how many vacant lots there were. So, you know, we'll have more of that to come as that advances. And then there's no other real HCD updates at this time. You're all aware of the LIHTC award from the last meeting, and Anne gets back from vacation. She's been gone for a couple weeks, so nothing real new to report from HCD, but really looking forward to keeping the ball rolling on all the things.
All right, sure. Are we ready to adjourn? Do I call?
Well, there is an HCD update. Can I ask if there's anything new on public housing? Any progress on that or a timeline?
No, not
Okay.
since the last meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot being discussed and we have a lot going on. We just got an administrator role filled, so they just started yesterday. I forget his name already. I'm a real big jerk. So I know he doesn't have an email yet, but he just started this week. So more to come on that for sure. At least we have a body now in-house to help us with this.
Yeah, when we know who it is, let me know so I can bug them instead of bugging you.
Awesome. Give him a minute, Joe. We don't want to scare him away right off the bat. No, just kidding. And then, yeah, just keep in mind that the next full commission meeting is July 7th, right around the corner. And then our next affordable housing meeting is on July 20th. But yeah, Shay, I think we're ready to go ahead and adjourn.
Okay. So yeah, so I moved to adjourn. I don't think we even have to vote on it. Yes.
Actually, hang on. So our next meeting is July 20th. The 20th? Okay.
That's what I wrote, but am I wrong? I think it's the third Wednesday of the month.
Third Wednesday of the month. So in August, that's going to conflict with the Arizona Housing Forum.
Okay.
So Wednesday, August 17th. We probably need to adjust that meeting.
Okay.
Maybe we can just push it back a week.
Yeah, I'll kind of send an email out to everybody to work on scheduling. So I'll ask what days would work better and kind of poll everybody, and then I'll make sure I get that fixed for our next meeting.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks.
thank you all.
Thanks for that, Jim.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye, everybody.